Jax watched the old metal locket land atop a pile of his only survival tools, realizing he was trading his entire future for a woman who didn't even know his name. The auctioneer's many-jointed fingers twitched toward the tarnished silver. Jax's hand hovered, the metal still warm from his palm, before he finally let go. Have you ever looked at a stranger and realized your entire life had been leading to a single reckless choice? Subscribe if you believe some debts can only be paid in courage. Now let's see where that choice led him. 3 weeks earlier, the station's water recycler had broken for the third time that week. The scavenger's ghost was wheezing, her life support systems rattling like a chest full of wet stones. The Dryad for a fresh core, but he had the coordinates for the rust-built hub. It was a jagged crown of scrap metal drifting in the gravity well of a dying star, a place where laws were as thin as the oxygen. The station smelled of dying ozone and old secrets, a cocktail that seeped into your bones if you lingered. Jax adjusted his breather, his boots clanging rhythmically against the floor of the decaying corridors. He was looking for a specific coupling, something to keep his ship's lungs from collapsing. He found Tovin in a recessed alcove, a man whose skin looked like cured leather and whose eyes moved with the twitchy grace of a cornered rodent. Tovin didn't deal in ship parts, not officially, but he knew the veins of the hub better than anyone. With a jerk of a chin, Tovin led him into the station's dangerous lower levels. The air grew thicker here, tasting of grease and unwashed bodies. They descended past the legitimate trade floors, down into the humid dark where the High Council's reach didn't extend, which meant the readings on Jax's wristcom were useless. They turned a corner into a cavernous hold, and the sound hit Jax first. A rhythmic, heavy chanting, followed by the sharp crack of an energy lash. It wasn't a marketplace for machinery, it was a secret slave auction. Jax tried to turn back, his heart hammering against his ribs, but the crowd surged forward. At the center of the ring, bathed in a sickly violet spotlight, stood a Silfari woman. Her skin had the iridescent sheen of oil on water, though it was dulled by layers of dust. Her name, according to the barker, was Lyra. Jax froze. He wasn't seeing a Silfari. He was seeing a ghost. His sister, Kaylee, had been 6 years old when the slavers took her, her small hand slipping from his as they dragged her into the dark. That same paralyzing guilt, cold and heavy as lead, flooded his chest. The bidding opened. It was far higher than the few credits Jax had left. He watched the faces of the bidders, men with hungry eyes who saw the woman as a useful tool and nothing more. In the cold vacuum of space, choice is the only currency worth everything. He reached into his jacket. His fingers closed around the only thing he had left of home. It was an old, tarnished metal locket, the hinges stiff with age. Inside was a faded picture of a girl who had been lost decades ago. It was sentimental, worthless to a merchant, but the silver was high purity, and the stone set in the center was a rare Jovian sapphire. He stepped forward, his voice cracking the humid air. He didn't just bid the locket. He emptied his pockets of his deck tools, his spare filters, and his nav chip. The auctioneer paused. The locket caught the violet light, shimmering with a sudden, desperate brilliance. The silence in the hold was a physical weight. Jax didn't look at Tovin, and he didn't look at the other bidders. He kept his eyes locked on the locket until the auctioneer's gnarled hand swept it off the pedestal. The transaction was final. He didn't rescue her. He just couldn't leave her there. As they hurried back toward the docking ring, the weight of the girl's silence was heavier than the ship parts he no longer possessed. Lyra walked 3 paces behind him, her movements fluid but mechanical, the iridescent sheen of her skin flickering with every flickering overhead light. Once they cleared the airlock of the scavenger's ghost, Jax turned, expecting a thank you or perhaps a scream. Instead, she stood by the rattling recycler, her eyes scanning the room for the nearest threat. "You're free," Jax said, his voice echoing in the cramped cabin. Lyra tilted her head, her gaze landing on the empty spot on his jacket where his tools used to hang. In the cold vacuum of space, choice is a currency I was never taught to spend, but they didn't have time for philosophy. A crimson light began to pulse on the bridge console. Warden Vaxon's military tracking signal had locked onto the ship's signature. The Locket hadn't just been a trade, it had been a flare. The Warden didn't like losing his assets, and he was already closing the distance. "They're coming for the tag," Lyra said, her voice dropping into a low, melodic hum. She didn't panic. Instead, she knelt by the main console and pulled a panel free. "Every repair I make is me rewriting the purpose they forced upon me." She began to work. Her fingers moved with a terrifying precision, bypassing security protocols that would have taken Jax hours to crack. She wasn't just a pilot or a servant. She was a specialized technical core, built to interface with the very relay stations that kept the hub in check. As the Ghost lurched under the first warning shot from the Warden's interceptor, Jax realized the science of their survival. The Warden's relay didn't just track ships, it utilized a localized quantum tether. By sabotaging the relay station, Lyra wasn't just hiding them, she was collapsing the bridge between the Warden's sensors and their physical location. Jax gripped the flight stick as they approached the relay station. It was a jagged needle of black glass. "Tell me when," he grunted. "Now," she whispered. The station didn't just explode, it vanished into a fold space tier of Lyra's making. The shock wave sent the Ghost spinning into the dark, but the red pulse on the console finally went dark. Days later, the ship drifted over an unclaimed moon. The air was thin but sweet, the soil untainted by the hub's grime. Jax was cleaning the lockers when he found it. The old metal locket sat atop a pile of recycled scrap. Lyra had retrieved it from the auctioneer's table before they fled, a final act of quiet theft. She held it out to him, her expression unreadable. "This belonged to someone you loved." Jax took the silver, but he didn't put it back in his jacket. He placed it on the ship's dashboard, a reminder. He had started this journey to quiet a ghost, but standing under the light of a new sun, he realized the past wasn't a weight anymore. It was the foundation. Choice had brought them here, and for the first time in his life, Jax wasn't running from the silence. The past doesn't have to be a ghost that haunts you. Sometimes, it's just the map that shows you the way home. I wonder, what's the one thing you'd trade everything for? We'll be back tomorrow with another story from the edge of the rim.